makes mental training and visualization more effective is when we assign cognitive labels to what's going on when we visualize. So what I mean is that people are much better at manipulating faces and vases in their mind's eye, of course, only once they've drawn them out physically with their hand, as I mentioned before, than they are manipulating abstract objects like impossible figures, in part because by labeling them faces and vases, people are able to capture a lot of other neural machinery that's related to faces and vases. In fact, we have entire brain areas on both sides of the brain devoted to the processing of faces. They're called fusiform face area. We have other areas in our brain that are involved in processing of 3D objects, but faces are of particular value. There's a value to understanding what a face is as opposed to a non-face, and there's a value to understanding what a particular face is. In fact, the simplest way to put this is that the human brain is, in many ways, a face recognition and expression of faces recognition machine. It, of course, does other things, but it is exceptionally good at that. Unless you're in a profession in which the relationships between 3D objects and your ability to manipulate them is exceedingly important, you're not going to have a lot of neural real estate specifically devoted to that. Some people will be better at it, some people will be worse. But when it comes to faces, unless you have a condition like prosopagnosia, which is an inability to recognize, say, famous faces and distinguish them from non-famous faces, or if you have some sort of face recognition deficit, which about anywhere from 1 perhaps to 3% of people out there have. They're just terrible at recognizing faces. And by the way, there's about 0.5% of people out there that are what are called super recognizers that can recognize faces in a large crowd. They can recognize specific faces even from just partial profiles. By the way, these people are extremely valuable to security agencies, and security agencies are very good at finding these people. Machines are quickly getting better, or at least as good as super recognizers, but the best super recognizers are still better than the best AI and machine algorithms out there. But the point is that in your mind's eye, you are better able to manipulate specific objects or to see things more clearly and with more specificity when it has a label that you recognize from your real world experience, as opposed to abstract or fictional labels. Okay? Again, stamping home the idea that what you experience in the real world really serves to support your mental imagery, and therefore the key importance of experiencing and doing things in the real world and supporting that with mental training and visualization, and not just relying on mental training and visualization. And the tangent here that's a little bit of fun, and I don't think we've ever talked about before on this podcast, is that of UFOs, unidentified flying objects. There's a lot of people out there who think that they've seen UFOs. I guess technically they have, because a UFO is an identified flying object. And if it's unidentified, at least to them, then it is indeed a UFO. I guess the question is whether or not, or the dispute rather, is whether or not those UFOs are actually flown by aliens or controlled by aliens. I think that's where the dispute lies. But you can imagine how if somebody sees an object in their environment and decides, that's a UFO, okay? Remember these faces, vases, or these impossible figures? If they say, oh, that thing is a UFO as opposed to something else, they see, in other words, the face, not the vase. Well, that stamps it down as a memory in their visual system and related systems. And then in their mind's eye, they are seeing the UFO. They're not seeing the other thing that it could possibly be, okay? So it's stamped down a very specific memory. So the point here is that mental training and visualization relies on not just the physical contours and the exact spatial profiles and the speed of movement of particular things that we experience in the real world. It also heavily depends on the cognitive labels and the decisions we make about the things that we see. And this will become very important as we build up toward our fourth principle of mental training and visualization, which is that our cognitive labels, that is, what we decide is happening when we do mental training and visualization, turns out to be very important. Now, this is not simply to say that you can decide, okay, I want to learn how to play piano, and so I'm going to tell myself that a particular chord I imagine in my mind's eye is identical to the real world chord just because I decide it is. The brain doesn't work that way. It's not lie to yourself and learn better as a consequence of the lies you tell yourself. However, what this tells us is that it is very, very important that your mental training and visualization accurately recapitulate the real world training that you're doing. So if we are going to stamp down a fourth principle of effective mental training and visualization based on what we know from the scientific literature, is that your mental training and visualization should assign labels to what you're doing that can be matched to real world training and experiences. Now, these can be somewhat abstract. So for instance, if you're trying to learn a particular aspect of the golf swing, okay, so let's say that you're working on your golf swing. It seems to be there are a lot of people out there working on their golf swing, and you're going to do some mental training and visualization in order to improve your golf swing. We already know, again, let's just march through them, that your mental training and visualization needs to be brief and simple.